extractive, wasteful, abusive, linear in all of its processes. Taking from the earth, making, wasting, sending its products back to the biosphere, waste to a landfill. I myself was amazed to learn just how much stuff the earth has to produce through our extraction process to produce $1 of revenue for our company. When I learned, I was flabbergasted. We're leaving a terrible legacy of poison and diminishment of the environment for our grandchildren's grandchildren, generations not yet born. Some people have called that intergenerational tyranny, a form of taxation without representation levied by us on generations yet to be. It's the wrong thing to do.
One of the questions that comes up periodically is to what extent could a corporation be considered to be psychopathic? And if we look at a corporation as a legal person, that it may not be that difficult to actually draw the transition between psychopathy in the individual to psychopathy in a corporation. We can go through the characteristics that define this particular disorder one by one and see how they might apply to corporations. They would have all the characteristics. And in fact, in many respects, a corporation of that sort is a prototypical psychopath.
If the dominant institution of our time has been created in the image of a psychopath, who bears the moral responsibility for its actions?
Can a building have moral opinions? Can a building have social responsibility? If a building can't have social responsibility, what does it mean to say that a corporation can? A corporation is simply an artificial legal structure. But the people who are engaged in it, whether the stockholders, whether the executives in it, whether the employees, they all have moral responsibilities.
It's a fair assumption that every human being, real human beings, flesh and blood ones, not corporations, but every flesh and blood human being is a moral person. You know, we've got the same genes, we're more or less the same, but our nature, the nature of humans, allows all kinds of behavior. I mean, every one of us, under some circumstances, could be, a gas chamber attendant and a saint.
No job, in my experience with Goodyear, has been as frustrating as the CEO job. Because even though the perception is that you have absolute power to do whatever you want, the reality is you don't have that power. Sometimes, if you had really a free hand, if you really did what you wanted to do that suits your personal thoughts and your personal priorities, you'd act differently. But as a CEO, you cannot do that. Layoffs have become so widespread that people tend to believe that CEOs make these decisions without any consideration to the human implications of their decisions. It is never a decision that any CEO makes lightly. It is a tough decision. But it is the consequence of modern capitalism.
When you look at a corporation, just like when you look at a slave owner, you want to distinguish between the institution and the individual. So slavery, for example, or other forms of tyranny are inherently monstrous. But the individuals participating in them may be the nicest guys you can imagine. Benevolent, friendly, nice to their children, even nice to their slaves, caring about other people. I mean, as individuals, they may be anything. As in their institutional role, they're monsters because the institution's monstrous. And the same is true here.
My wife and I, some years ago, had at our home a demonstration. 25 people arrived. They hung a big
banner on the top of our house saying murderers. They danced around outside in gas masks and so on.
How are you? My name's John. How are you? Well, you're not looking at me when you say it. You have to be a little bit careful because I'm very sensitive to people who are not friendly.
Hello.
Okay. Did you notice you being recorded and filmed as well?
No, I didn't.
No. Well,
you'll see yourself on television.
But it'd be polite to mention, wouldn't it? I mean, here we are. We're not
politeness. This is involved in a corporation which is funding directly police, which this corporation has admitted.
Who is a corporation?
A corporation is an organisation of individuals, and this individual is part of that corporation. So he's responsible for the act.
As a public demonstration, it wasn't very effective. There were only two. This is a very rural area, 2 people and a dog, and it's not a very big house, which I think rather surprised them. But then we sat down and talked to them for a couple of hours, and you know, we gave them tea and coffee, and they had lunch on our lawn.
Well, there's another coffee coming. There's no... Who wants it? I'm sorry about the Sawyer. Anyway, I've not put down...
No need for you to be deceitful. Why didn't you just ask me whether I was in?
Hello, can we hang a murderer's banner off?
After about 20 minutes, they said, well, the problem's not you, it's Shell. So I said, no, wait a minute, let's talk about what is Shell. It's made up of people like me. In the end, what we found in that discussion was all the things that they were worried about, I was worried about as well. Climate, oppressive regimes, human rights. The big difference between us was I feel that I actually can make a contribution to this. These people were frustrated because they felt they had nothing to do.
So an individual CEO, let's say, may really care about the environment. And in fact, since they have such extraordinary resources, they can even devote some of their resources to that without violating their responsibility to be totally inhuman.
Which is why, as the Moody Stuarts serve tea to protesters, Shell Nigeria can flare unrivaled amounts of gas, making it one of the world's single worst sources of pollution. And all the professed concerns about the environment do not spare Ken Saro-Wiwa and 8 other activists from being hanged for opposing Shell's environmental practices in the Niger Delta.
A corporation is not a person, it doesn't think. People in it think. And for them, it is legitimate to create Terminator technology so that farmers are not able to save their seeds. Seeds that will destroy themselves through a suicide gene. Seeds that are designed to only produce crop in one season. You really need to have a brutal mind. It's a war against evolution to even think in those terms. But quite clearly, profits are so much higher in their minds.
The profit motive, which drove Fudsy to accomplish so much, may bring out the evil as well as the good.
Hello?
My work spans all industry sectors. I mean, I virtually have worked for, like, I'd say 25% of the Fortune 500. I've posed as an investment banker. I've posed as a venture capitalist. I set up front companies that are executive recruiting firms. Essentially, I'm a spy.